Hello, good evening, everyone. And we are live from the Mash headquarters, i.e., me and Simon's house. Yeah, you're all really welcome. And thank you so much for tuning in. We've had a lot of excitement and questions about our webinar, back to school webinar. Unfortunately, it's a sad moment because this always signals, it's like the Rose of Tralee or Glenroe, that the summer is ending. But we do have another week and we have a great talk to listen to. So anyway, welcome to all of you. And thank you so much for tuning in. I want to introduce our lovely speaker and teacher and doctor, Treasa Bowe. So Dr. Treasa Bowe, and very kindly agreed to talk for us. I guess most people on Instagram or Facebook would know of Treasa through her Instagram page and through the work she does in literacy, building bridges of understanding. I'm going to read her bio out because I think it's important to put it into context, I suppose. What Treasa is going to speak about and why she's qualified to speak about it. So Dr. Treasa Bowe, she's a primary school teacher and she's from Cork. She's been teaching for over 20 years now. She's taught 17 years in Ireland and recently 5 years. She was teaching in a school, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, KIPP or KIP, in Diva College Preparatory School, Los Angeles, California. So that is very cool. So across her career, she's very interested, particularly in literacy, and she did her master's on comprehension strategy instruction. She was a pivotal member of the team that developed the highly regarded comprehension program, which I'm sure every good teacher has in their classroom and every good school uses. Building Bridges of Understanding, and that's Mary Immaculate College, 2009. Treasa's PhD research focused on the role of on-site CPD, that's really interesting, continual professional development in promoting a whole school approach to CSI. And then most recently, Treasa has become better known on Instagram as between the covers of a good book. And she's extremely generous, sharing her extensive knowledge and experience about literacy and picture books on a daily basis. Like her Instagram feed is constant CPD, really, I think, for most primary school teachers. So we are really excited and just really, really, really happy that Treasa has agreed to speak for us tonight. So welcome, Treasa.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Roz.
Lovely to have you. Yeah, so the format is, what time is it now? It is about 8:05. So we're hoping to get out by 9 o'clock. We should. And I know we'll probably go on, we could go on all night, but we'll get you out by 9. So the format is going to be a talk. So Treasa is going to be giving about, I think she said about 20 to 25, 30 minutes talk. And she's going to be speaking about, I suppose it's like setting up new routines for the year when you start with a new class, which is, at the minute when I'm looking at Instagram, Treasa, I just see that everyone is giving their advice on how to set up a class and what to do. Now, again, with everything, everyone has to listen to the advice and then apply it to their own classroom, and take whatever good tips they feel are useful to them. But you're going to be speaking about the language. I think it's really important. I always spend weeks on this as well, on the rules and the routines and what you expect and how we speak to each other and so on. So it is going to be really interesting. If any of you out there would like to send a question in, you can pop it in the comments box on YouTube or Facebook. The lovely Simon is in the sitting room behind the scenes doing tech. So we're just telling him what to do in tech, me and Treasa tonight. He will be popping up any questions or comments after that you have. And please do send them in, because afterwards we are going to be drawing out of a virtual hat whoever, anyone who comments or makes a question or says something motivational or positive or nice, no negative comments, they will get treats sent to their school, and we have really special treats. You'll love these treats. So please do make a comment, and then we will kind of end and wind up the hour, and it'll go really, really quickly. So with that, I see there's a couple of comments in already, which is great. So any questions you have, just send them in for Treasa, and that's it really. Okay, Treasa, you are on. I know you have a slideshow to show as well, so I'm going to go away for a while now and just listen.
Perfect, and thank you so much, Ross. Thank you everybody for tuning in. What I want to talk about is really the framework for my whole year. But it starts in those first couple of weeks where we're working on accountable talk. And I know I have been talking about this on Instagram, and people have been saying, well, what is this? So this is just the perfect forum for me to go through what I do. And this is, I suppose, my first year in a while in working with a primary language curriculum. And as I looked back on it, coming back to Ireland, it really struck me. This is the approach that ties it all together. And it brought me back to this quote, which is that reading and writing float on a sea of talk. We know we've got an integrated language curriculum, but oral language is where it starts. To read, to write, you need to be able to think, and to think, you need to be able to express your thoughts. So that's why I spend so long at the start of the year making sure my children not only have things that they want to express, but that they have the language to express it with. So looking at where is this going in terms of the primary language curriculum, for me, we're not always looking at every lesson at pulling out some of the learning objectives. It's in the framework that we build, it all goes in the same direction. So we're talking about engagement, listening, and attention, because a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is the skills of being a good listener, as well as being somebody who is able to express themselves. We're looking at being able to use language with confidence. We're looking at language with clarity. We're using language to demonstrate our understanding. Very much this asking questions, but authentic questions, not a series of questions. Giving information, explaining, and justifying. And that's a huge part of where we're going with this. And then, of course, reflecting. So you can see it's bringing in a lot of your oral language. So what are my long-term goals as I start this? There's two parts that I'm picking here. I start a lot with whole class, but for me, I want a lot of my work to be done in small groups as I go through the year. But you can't just send children into small groups. You have to set them up for success by teaching them the skills to be able to run that group. And some of this starts in that whole class instruction, in those read alouds. So in my read alouds, I want the children to be engaged and active. I want them to be able to build on other children's ideas. Because when I started building bridges first, what I noticed was that a child would, make a comment or make a prediction, and that another child would turn to them and say, "You stole my idea. That was what I was going to say." So instead, what we want to teach them is the language of these ideas don't belong to any one person in particular. They're co-owned. But we can build on other people's ideas, and people can take our ideas and piggyback on them without it being stealing. But also we need to be able to challenge other ideas and do it in a respectful manner and have our ideas challenged as well. And rather than just defend our ideas, be able to consider it, maybe change, maybe not, and build an understanding that is personal to our group. This then transfers over to small group, where our students will be able to run a group because they have this language and they have this language structure. Because I'm sure we're all used to sending children into a group, walking over and going, "Why isn't nobody doing anything?" That they will engage in authentic discussions, and that they will accept diverging opinions, and that it's going to be inclusive of all members. Again, in every group, you're going to have people who like to lead the group and really want to be involved in conversations, and you're going to have quieter members of the group. So we're going to look at how can we make sure that everybody is speaking. So this, I think, is my instructional framework for the whole year. I want to have a dialogic classroom. So that means I want to have the gradual release responsibility where I'm not the one leading everything. I teach explicitly, but the responsibility gets transferred over to the students. So the control is going to be shared between the teachers and the students. I talk a lot about complex texts or context, so the children must have something to talk about. But I'm also going to have to teach a lot of collaboration skills. So I'm going to want to create an environment which is safe for students, where they feel that they're able to take risks, where they feel that they're respected, that they're going to be listened to. And this is the reason that I tend to keep my groups the same for very long periods of time. Sometimes I keep them the same the whole year. Sometimes I change them up per term, but I don't do the random draws and find a partner. I work really, really hard to build up that relationship in the group, to build them as a community, to build that safe space. I'm very mindful and intentional in my pairings and in my groups that I put together to make sure that there are stronger members and members that need more support. So I keep that community together, and I see the difference by doing that. I want to make sure that when they're in those supported communities, then that everybody has the language skills to speak. And of course, then I'm also teaching the literacy skills. So throughout my year, they're the 5 elements that I'm working on. And in the beginning, I'm going to really work on these 2 elements of the collaboration skills and the language skills. This is what a traditional classroom looks like. And this is how I started teaching, where the teacher is the center and everything goes through the teacher. Child, teacher, teacher, child, teacher, and it goes back and forth. The children are always looking at the teacher, and the teacher is very much chairing the conversation. This is what a dialogic classroom looks like, and this is what we are trying to build from the start of the year, that the children are interacting with each other. They look at the speaker, they talk to each other, and that the teacher is really just the facilitator of the discussion rather than the person it's all going through. That does not happen by accident though, so that's where we're working. The roles the teacher is going to take is you're an intentional instructor in that you know what you want to teach, but you're also a fading facilitator. So your job is actually in some ways to remove yourself from it, to give the children enough skills, enough knowledge that they can do this without you, and an effortful evaluator. So at the end of each session, you'll see we come in, we reflect, we see what we did well and what we can change. But the students have roles in this too. They're engaged learners, they're thoughtful interpreters, and they're reflective responders. So you can see like the control that both students and the teacher has. This is where then the back to school part comes in. So when I'm doing accountable talk, there is some language that I'm going to give the kids, but there's also things I want to look at. So I need to explicitly teach them to look at the speaker. Now, like not stare at them. And there are some places where it's not culturally responsive for people to look at the speaker, and that's different. But when a child talks in the group, you don't want every child still staring at the teacher. So you teach the children to turn and look at the person who's talking. And when another person talks, we turn to them. So we follow the speaker or track the speaker. We talk then in another lesson about, okay, so when everybody's looking at you, how can you show that you're listening? How can you be supportive? And I would brainstorm these with the children. And some of it might be through nodding and agreeing. Some of it might be, we used very much in America, the I agree symbol, and that works really well as a nonverbal signal. And then, asking a question in your group, developing what's been said, and teaching that it's okay to agree and it's okay to disagree. So in our groups, we're going to have one focus in each session. And this was a question that I was asked, how many of these are you going to teach? You can probably teach 2 things. One might be a nonverbal and one would be a verbal. So for example, that if we're saying, okay, the student is speaking, how can we show the student we're listening? That's a nonverbal one you might track, but you might also at the same time be saying, okay, for the child who's speaking, this is a way that you can express your opinion. So we're going to look, or you can group the language together as well. So you can say, okay, I want to show somebody and express that I'm going to agree with what they're saying. What are the different ways that I can say I'm agreeing? And I would put those ones up then. So you could have 2 or 3 of those, no more than 3, because again, you want the children to be focused in on this. You explicitly name what we're doing. So in this session, we're going to focus in on agreeing. So showing somebody that we have the same opinion of them as them. Or we can focus in on disagreeing. So showing somebody that we do not have the same opinion as them. And then we need to focus in, and this is really important, we need to say why this matters. Why does it matter to somebody to say that you agree with them? Why does it matter to respectfully say that you disagree? We then, as a class, before we ever get into our main session, we talk about, well, what does it look like when we do this? More importantly here, what does it sound like? And again, why is it important? During that session, particularly in the opening ones, I mightn't actually be that focused in on what the children are actually saying if I'm looking for the accountable talk. So I'm going to shout out, go, oh, I see that Jane is agreeing with Samantha, and I would call it out to remind everybody this is what we should be doing, and to acknowledge the students that are doing it. So if I'm focusing on participation, for example, in my groups, I'm going to stand back and look who's doing the talking, who's not doing the talking. What are the strategies we can use to include them? And also remember, some of the reasons why people may not be talking is because they don't have the language to express themselves. So if you're teaching something, think about the sentence frames that might be helpful. Are there students in your class that would benefit from these sentence frames? Would that give them the structure to be able to participate? Here are a couple of techniques that I've used that help looking at participation. The first one is very, very simple, very, very effective. If you've got 4 children in your group, put in Unifix cubes of 4 colors. So each child has a particular color. And then as they contribute to the discussion, they add their cube to the tower. And that way you can very quickly see who's participating. It gives a tracker of the conversation. It's just a concrete reminder for everybody. If you see your color is coming up too much there, maybe you need to, include somebody else. The Tower of Understanding is also one that I do at the beginning of the year, and it's very good for not only building group work, but again, for making sure that everybody's participating. So I give each group a pile of index cards. You can give any different topic that you want. At the beginning of the year, I just ask them to think about what they have in common. So they go through and they want to build the highest possible tower. So they're focused in on finding as many things as they have in common as possible. So there's a real incentive to talk this one out. I don't tell them how to build a tower. That's up to them to figure it out. But we say in the beginning, you cannot build your tower until the timer goes off. And then they have talking time and building time. And the last one here, this isn't a picture from my class, but it does the same thing as I would do. It's a web of understanding. So each group has a ball of yarn. When you make a contribution, you hold the end and you pass the ball to the next person who holds it and then passes it to the next. So you can again see a visual of the conversation path. So they're just good ways of focusing in on the participation. As I said, nonverbals fit in really well here as well. So having signals, this is the American Sign Language for agree, which is why we use that, signal for disagree. Perhaps you want to include a signal for questions, particularly if you have it already from building bridges. Some groups like to have, I want to speak when you're finished to signal, because they're just very conscious that they do want to speak and they're prepared to wait as long as everybody knows. And then another nice one is spirit fingers. We use that whole class and in small groups. And it's just a support for the child who's trying to think through their thoughts, might be getting a bit stuck. And the spirit fingers is just saying, hey, we got you. We're interested in what you're saying and we're there with you. These community builders can all be used as ways in to focus in on, the language that we're using, because in all of them, you're focusing on children interacting. I shared this on Instagram. It's my back to school slide deck. So what I've done here is I've just looked at it and in red highlighted all the different group activities that we're going to be doing that would be a focus for one of these. So just to look at what you're doing and say, which of these could I use to teach either the language or the nonverbal structure that I need for my children to be able to not only converse in literacy, but to be able to take ownership of other subject areas as well. So these then are the slides that I do. You will see lots of teachers put up accountable talk slides. However, there's a difference between putting them on your wall and explicitly teaching them. So I don't have them on my wall right now, and they won't be on my wall when the children come in, because we will teach these 1 or 2 at a time. And then they go up as we do them. And sometimes it's going to need 2 or 3 goes to get it right. So at the top, I kind of grouped them together so you can see ones that you can work on. So, working as a team, going back to the cues. If you see that there's one child who's not taking part, well, then rather than the teacher being the one to come over and say, okay, what's going on here, you need to teach the children how to respectfully include them. So it could be just as simple as, what do you think? Or, we haven't heard from this person. Let's see what they think. With all of it as well, one of the things that you need to do to check if you don't have people contributing is, as a teacher, just check the content clarity. Have you modeled it? Maybe some students are going to need process steps. So just the steps to do the task left up on the board. Do checks for understanding before they go into their group work. Again, just to make sure that the confusion or a silence in a group is not to do with them not knowing what to do. And then we look at how can we give them the language to use talking as a tool for thinking and interthinking. Because we don't want our children sitting with just their own thoughts, stretching it, having to express yourself, having to listen to what other people say, having to revise your opinion. That's where you get to your depth of understanding. So this is the sharing your thoughts section, teaching them, I believe this, and the important one, because. We always want to extend that out. So keep on going at the because, and that will take thought. In the text it says, so being able to link it back and find evidence to support your thoughts. I have an idea, in my opinion. And then this section, so those three, as you can see, I've them all in under share your thoughts. You could teach 2 or 3 of those together because they're very similar. I believe this because, in my opinion, they're going to be very similar. But then again, we want the children not only just listening, but they're actively listening. So they're listening to understand, they're listening to ask questions. If we don't teach them the explicit language, there's a danger that they will say, oh, for goodness sake, that's silly. That doesn't make sense. You're wrong. All of those languages, they're going to shut kids down. But we do need them to be able to seek to understand. So instead, teach them that. Can you explain more about? Could you give me an example of it? I'd like to know more about that. And what I found is, as I was doing this with kids and going, actually, these are really good for me as an adult to be thinking about as well. We definitely need a space where diversity within discourse is respected. So that's what we have to teach, and we model it. So I agree with you, because that's an interesting point that you're making. I'd like to add on to it. I'd like to build on somebody's idea. But then they're respectfully disagreeing. So I've worded this carefully. I respectfully disagree with what you said, because, so if you notice, I didn't respectfully disagree with you. I disagree with what you said. Small difference, but it matters. I see things differently because I have a different perspective. Because when I first started teaching this, I was going, I'm not sure, this works in America, maybe it doesn't work in Cork. It worked. It worked so well that, there would be an instance in the yard. I'd bring them in, we'd explore it. This is the language that would all come in. Now, it didn't stop what happening in the yard again, but it did give the language structure for it. And somebody pointed out that, this is very linked in with restorative justice. And it is the whole parts, they all come together, they all fit in. We need to teach children that they should change their opinion, that it's okay to do that, that it's not a sign that you were wrong in the beginning. And that needs to be modeled, and it needs to be taught. So teaching them to say, I hadn't considered that. What I would say is also important is, while we're talking about the gradual release of responsibility and you're teaching it and then you're letting them off, you also need to know when to step in. When they're not quite ready and they need more support, the teacher should step in and see, can we fix that up then? And at the end of each of these sessions, we would look at a reflection, go, well, this was our focus. So what did we think went well? Celebrate it. But what are our areas of growth? Don't stop there. Okay, so if that is what we could work on, what step could we take the next time that would improve it? Write that down. And then that's your focus that we look at the next time we do this. I won't do this forever. I'll only do this when I'm explicitly teaching the accountable talk, because it's as important as anything else. But say November, December, when I'm fully in, the reflection won't be about the dialogue that we had, because it will be second nature to us. So here are some ideas of activities that we can do that we can build this all in. For me, name and identity is going to be one of my big focuses in my first week. So the picture book that I'm reading is The Name Jar. Straight away, read aloud, eyes following the speaker, listening, contributing, they all come in there. I also, though, have an activity designed. I took the names of my kids and I just, there it is. So like I put each letter on a card. I'm going to divide them up between the groups, and they play a form of Scrabble with the names. But within that, again, the language is everybody being involved. I have an idea, I disagree with you, teaching all of that. I'm going to have an activity that they take home where they learn their name story, or they discuss their name story, and then sharing it with their groups. Again, the turn taking, the showing that you're listening. And then another small activity, I took, I think it's 10 quotes that have to do with names. So I'm going to put them around the room. They're going to go around with their group and put a dot on the ones that mean something to them. The more dots they put, the more it means to them. And again, the dialogue is going to come in there. So it's all opportunities where this isn't high risk learning. It is lovely that they're going to be learning about their names, but it's far more important for me that they're learning how to communicate. Also going to do it in maths, old habit. So one activity that I have for the group work is it's a scavenger hunt with maths. So there's going to be 9 simple math functions. They work it out, they find the answer, they write down the code. But again, the dialogue is going to be there, making sure you involve all the members of the group, what you do if you think somebody is wrong. Same with the brain teasers. And I also have, I don't know if you were able to see that there, but this is a collaborative problem solving. So each page has got 6 parts to the problem. Each card has a piece of information. So each person has a clue that they need to give the group to be able to answer the question. So they're just this, again, accountable talk. It's right across the curriculum. And then let's see. This is the last one then I have to share. So it's about, I think this one I haven't tried before this year, but I think it's really, really good. It's a tower building activity. So what you do is in an area of your room that nobody else can see, or like just put a barrier in front of it, you have built a tower using a certain amount of material. So it could be that it's got 2 big cups, a red piece of paper, small cups, toothpick, whatever you want to do. The design isn't important. What's important is that you have all the material that you need for each group to build it. But you don't put the right material into each bag. So you give some of the children too many of the big cups, and some of the children get too few of the small cups. So nobody has enough in their bag to build the tower. They can send one child back to see the tower. The child can go back as many times as they want, but they have to come back and communicate to their group, you know, what the tower looks like, what they need. You don't tell the children that they don't have enough material. But they have to figure out that they're short material and that other groups have the material. And then you'll really see this accountable talk coming with how can they converse with the rest of the group? How can they use all of that positive dialogue that we've been talking about so that they can give something and take something so that everybody wins and everybody gets what they need at the end of it. So that is, that's my slides. So I think we're ready for questions and answers then.
Thank you very much, Treasa. Thanks a million. That was excellent. And I know we're getting lots and lots of really positive and excited comments there as well all the way through. I was trying to keep up with them. I'll read out a few because it's always nice to just read really encouraging ones. People saying hello to me there at the beginning, and then getting into, yeah, they're just wondering, hopefully the talk will be available after on our YouTube channel. It's recorded live, so it'll be up on YouTube for people to see. The first question we have there, I'll read it out. It's from Sarah Mealy. And if Simon wants to pop it up there, yeah. Are your read aloud sessions whole class or small group, or how do you go about setting them
No,
up?
read alouds are always whole class. And then in small group is when I give them different texts. So they may have texts that they're using in small group, but the read aloud is always whole class.
Okay. Okay. And then someone asked, now this is, Treasa, we asked people on Instagram for the last week to put any questions they had to you. Some of them are not linked to this, and I think you've had a look at them and kind of, you can let us know if they don't really connect to the topic you're speaking about. But the first one was, I suppose, on the subject of groups for reading. And what is the best way to organise small groups for reading if you only have the class teacher in the room? No, again, I suppose it'd be interesting to see what it was like in the school you worked in America. How did SCT work, and what was support like in class? Was it just you? How many children in your class, and how did you work that then in the American classroom?
How many children in my class? I went from 36 to 38. So every
Oh my
year there
goodness.
was 36 minimum, and 38 was the highest I had. It varied across the 5 years. In the first 2 years, there was 2 teachers in the class together. So we did a co-teaching. In the last year, we did departmentalized teaching. So I taught all the literacy to both grade classes, and the other teachers taught the math to both classes. All of the support was push in, which I loved. So it some of the time the pushed into the whole class, and some of the time the RSP pushed into the small group. With regards to small group on your own, it's not ideal, and it will differ depending on where you are, like what level of the school you're in. So I'm going to talk about what would it be like if I was in third, fourth, fifth, or sixth. I would say then you really need to consider who needs the support the most. Small groups does not need to be rotating from center to center. All children do not need the same level of support. So you need to look and just consider who needs support and pull them more than the rest of the children get. So for example, last year I had 11 children out of my class of 33 who were reading at a first grade level, and they were in fifth grade. So straight away, they did not need the same level of support that the children who were on grade level. They needed more support than the children who were on grade level. So they came to me every single day. Whereas the children who were on grade level met with the teacher in small group once a week. So I would say, like, differentiate that way. The children who need more support see you more regularly. The children who need less support might see you once a week. And that's fine too. If they're on grade level, then you're just trying to challenge them and move them on. Whereas if they are not on class level, then what you actually are trying to do is trying to fill in those foundational literacy skills. So I would definitely be starting at looking at an assessment to identify who needs the support, what type of supports that they need, what areas do they need to focus in on, and being really targeted. So it's not just a small group, it's do they need support in phonics? And if it's that they need support in phonics, then which of the phonics skills do they have and which of the phonics skills do they not have, so that you can pull together the kids that need that support. You also don't need to have the same kids coming to you in that group. So if there's like one member of the rough group you've made who actually has got this, and there's somebody else who was in a different group that you've seen through their work hasn't it, then pull them in, switch it up, make sure that you have the children working with you who need that support. Because if you've only got yourself, then you've limited time and limited resources.
Yeah, it makes sense. And there was a lot of questions about that, Treasa, in terms of, I think there was a lot of questions from teachers about how it works if we don't have access to an SCT all day and how we'll set up my stations. And I think maybe people think sometimes in Ireland, we kind of think we're the only ones that have it this way in the Irish classrooms and everyone else has much better resources. But it's always comforting in a way to hear that, you know, in the classroom you were working in America, in the school, bigger classes. And again, you have to manage children that are totally different, way different levels, way below from where they are. So it is comforting in a way to know that there's no miracle cure for it. Unfortunately, you just have to do your best. I think it's really good to give more time, obviously, to the children that need it. There was a question there then, and again, it's interesting that I'm asking about the American classroom a bit more. It was the last question that was asked was about workbooks. So it was, how do I incorporate the school's English program with a workbook that the children will have bought? Now, I guess with that type of question is, number one, what is the workbooks? We're very workbook dominated in Ireland. You know that you've been here for a long time, but we really are. So was it like that in America? Was it different?
It was different, but it was different in a totally different way in that they didn't have textbooks as we would understand it either. So everything was consumable. So the textbook would come in a very light paper form. It was like more of a magazine for different parts of it, and you would give that out. There was no, in the school I was in, there was no photocopying allowance. You could just photocopy anything you wanted. So in that way, it wasn't so much workbook, but you had access to, give them as much material as you needed, but it was more teacher created. So I would look at the text, I would look at what writing I wanted them to do. I would look at how scaffolded that would need to be, and I'd create that and then print it. In terms of workbooks in Ireland, the first thing I would say is don't write into them. The biggest issue is when teachers get the children to write into some of the workbook and not all of the workbook. So if you're teaching second class to sixth class, don't write into it. If it's not written into, then it goes home new. And very few parents have issues with a completely clean workbook going home because they can sell it on. Whereas if you've written into 2 pages of it, you can't use that workbook. The other thing I would always say is, look, you're led by the curriculum and your school plan. Every other book is a resource. And that needs to be remembered in all of this. You are not being told to teach a scheme. You are being told to teach the PLC and to follow your school plan on it. And in my experience, and I know my experience is not everybody else's experience, and I have been very lucky, but having conversations with your school leadership where you say, this is what I want to teach. This is what I'm following. This is my plan. If you have a conversation and you put forward the issue and you put forward a solution, in my experience, most schools are open to that. Again, I had prescribed curriculum in America, 2 prescribed curricula. So I had a novel and I had it's called Benchmark, a text, and I did have some issues with both of them. And when I went, they hated, I would come with my laptop going, I have something to say, but I was always listened to. I always had, a reason why this was an issue. Sometimes it was that there was no phonics in one of the issue, or there was no writing in the other. And when I brought the issue with the solution, they were always happy to go with me. But I know the workbook, it takes conversation. And it also takes more work if the teacher's not following workbook. It takes more work for the teacher, but it's better.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think there's definitely a growing number of teachers that are hopefully moving away from workbook, but there'll always be people who enjoy that type of thing, I guess. Now, I know you were saying your experience is working in the senior classes, but there was a question from Leslie Ann Matthews, and thank you, Leslie Ann, about how you might incorporate the dialogic approach in senior infant classroom with a younger class.
It works there as well, because when we started building bridges, everybody's going, I don't know, infants, maybe we could start it in first class, maybe we should teach them to read first, and then what you're doing is you're giving the children the vocabulary for this. You're giving them the language with which they can express. You need to take it slower, but it's teaching them, turn and look at your partner, turn and look at the person who's speaking, show them the spirit fingers. Show them that you're agreeing. You take it little bit by little bit by little bit. It means that you mightn't be trying to remove yourself completely from it as quickly as a sixth class teacher would. Particularly if I'm teaching sixth class and those kids have been doing this for years, then when they come up to me, I'm just resetting, reestablishing, and removing myself. The infant teacher is going to stay in that longer, but take smaller steps and back and back and back. But they can use all of this language. They can tell you what their opinion is. They can definitely tell you, because one of the jobs as a teacher you have to do, though, is sometimes rephrase what they're saying. Because they can tell you a really long, long, long explanation, and you need to tie it together and say, so what you're saying is, so that we can all see and we can all understand. With infants as well, don't be afraid to ask the clarifying questions yourself. So lots of times they'll say, oh, I have a connection to make, red is my favorite color too. And you to try and tease that one out to see, where are we going with this? How can we lead this to develop understanding? But slowly, and they'll do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Infants are great. They're able to do everything. And we think they're small little people. The question there from, thank you, Treasa, Sinead Dugan, I hope I pronounced that correctly. So she's speaking about the groups that you spoke about. And I thought that was actually, when I heard you speaking about that, you keep the groups more or less the same. I was like, yes, why didn't I think of that? And it just makes sense, because they get comfortable, they build a relationship up with the children that they may not. And if you're moving all the time, especially children that are more introverted, they don't get that chance to form the bond. So even every term, as you said, you might want to switch them. But Sinead was wondering, do you try out the groups in the first 2 weeks and then make changes if needed? Or how do you go about setting up your groups?
So I've done it both ways. Prior to last year, I would have said the first 2 weeks were for me to get to know the kids, get to know them academically, get to know them socially, so that I was able to determine who was strong, who was weak. And like when I say weak, weaker in terms of maybe not being able to contribute to discussions as much, a quieter listener. And I did that, and that really worked. And then last year, when we went back, wherever we put the kids sitting was where the kids were going to have to sit. So I asked one of the set teachers who had worked with them, and we sat down before the kids came in, and I placed the kids strategically so that I had quicker access to the children who were going to need more support. So they were like all sitting at the ends of rows, so I would be able to get to them easier. But we had paired them so that each child had a strong partner if they needed it, and those pairs turned into fours. And that actually worked incredibly well, because all of the community builders that we did then were with the group that they were going to work with. So it depends. If you have access to somebody who already knows those kids, that is an option to do. But otherwise, use the first 2 weeks. I would still just keep them kind of where you have them seated. And then by the end of the 2 weeks, you probably know your pairings.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Thank you. We have so many questions and comments. My goodness, people are really getting into it now. So this is a question from Gunita or Junita. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. I've never seen that name before. It's lovely. So, hi, Treasa. Do you have any book list for EAL learners in junior school that would benefit from to build their vocabulary? Thank you. I'm sure you have millions of book lists, don't you, Treasa?
I have the book list. It's on the link in my Instagram. It's not specifically for EAL learners, but I would say in the junior school, you could use any of them. You just need to be targeted in your approach that you want, like which vocabulary do you want to teach? And look as well at the sentence structures that you want to teach, which I think is really, really, really important. If you are work with the junior infant picture book or a senior infant take a picture book, but you want to teach them the sentence structure to be able to express themselves with it, and obviously whatever vocabulary that they might need with it. But if you click on the link on my Instagram account, you'll see there's a junior school picture book and a senior school one as well.
That is lovely. Thank you. So make sure you go over to, I always call it beneath, but it's between the covers of a good book. I don't know why I always type in beneath. It's kind of the same thing. It's tucked in with a good book. And on that note, what are you reading yourself at the minute that is non-teaching? Do you read fiction or?
So I read kids' books. I don't find the time to read because I read teacher books and I read kids' books, and that's all I've done. But because I teach fifth and sixth class, a good book there is really good. So I'm just after finishing graphic novels because I'm trying to get the graphic novels read so I can get them into my library in school. So the graphic novel I was reading is called Invisible and was really, really good.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, fifth class are great. I've taught fifth class for the last, I've taught fifth class a lot. Yeah, no, they're great. That'll be lots of fun, especially the graphic novels. Yeah, they love them. Even my little boy is 8, he loves graphic novels, just loves them. Yeah, they're just very cool and hip and happening. There are lots of questions. I suppose there's 3 questions there, all about infant classes, and I think you've kind of dealt with them already, Trust, the younger classes. How do you approach it? And again, it's in the same way. It's just it's slower, I guess. And the hand signals
Yeah.
are excellent as well for the infant classes too. I have a question here from Ethan Muraku. And if you want to expand on this a bit, Tracy, if you could expand even again, I'm always interested in what other countries are doing and how, I suppose, what children with additional needs, how inclusion works in America, in the school you're in. I suppose you can't speak for American schools, but so what advice would you have to include or engage a non-verbal child with ASD? This is very specific, I know, Tracy, into the group discussions. So do you rely on the SNA to speak for the child or ask SNA to work on language child beforehand?
Part of the reason for the very structured approach, and I know I'm not taking nonverbal here, but if we work with the child with ASD, is it gives every child structure. So a lot of children with ASD would prefer to have this structured language and the ways into it. Um, it depends on the relationship between the SNA, the teacher, the whole lot. You could do both. Um, and again, I'd say it would depend on the plan that you have for the child as well. My instinct would always be if the child is able to express anything themselves, then the pre-teaching is a great way to do it. But because the group is responsive, which means that the conversation can go in a way that you didn't expect it to go, you do need to be able to have somebody then that's able to advocate for what the child wants to contribute to the discussion. In the case of a nonverbal child, you definitely, I imagine, would have picture cues and picture cards coming in. And that's another reason why I would keep the group the same, because true inclusion there would mean that you would be teaching all of the group how to use the picture cards to communicate. So whatever way the child communicates, then everybody in that group should be learning to understand the communication that way, which I imagine would do wonders for everybody in the group.
Yeah, that would be lovely. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. And then there's a question from Rebecca Hayden. Do you allow a new book into your life? So do you give this new book permission to go into your classroom library before reading it first, or do you just sneak it in there and let them find it? What are your views on that?
I never sneak a book in. Every book gets a fanfare when it goes in. My issue is I do want to read it, particularly in a lot of cases I've bought it, so I want to read it. And yet, if everybody has to wait for me to get through my reading list, then they're going to be sitting waiting. So my general thing is I normally know the book before I bought it. You know, I've read reviews or there's something that's drawn me to this, so I know it's okay. If I'm not going to be able to read it quick enough, then I put it in. If I'm going to be able to get to it, I read to it myself and then I put it in. I've no problem putting books in without me reading it, but I do want to read them because the thing is, when I go to talk to children about books, when I go to book push, and you need to know the book to be able to recommend it. So there are lots of books in my library, and I have a whole to read book case. But if I haven't read it, it's very hard to recommend it because I don't really know what it's about.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I would definitely do the same, make a big excitement about a new book going in and kind of push it really on them. And then I'm going to leave that there in the library now. Yeah, definitely. I imagine I know you were documenting your travels over from America. Did you have millions of books?
They're still in Los Angeles. It's very upsetting.
Oh,
They're boxed up by a port side, but there's no sign of them budging. But there are many boxes. We'll just say the movers came, looked at them, and just said to me, "Did you ever hear of a Kindle?" It's for the kids. It's for the kids. But
yeah.
it's
I
going to
have a
be
Kindle,
interesting.
but I only kind of use the Kindle for holidays or for books that I know I won't want to read again. I just can't have to have millions of books, and it gets a little bit stressful, doesn't it, in the house when they get cluttered. But still, I wouldn't be
Yeah.
without them.
Well, the thing is, like the Kindle, when I like adult books, I'll put on the Kindle. But the kids' books, the whole point of reading it is so that I can give it to them. So it doesn't serve a function for me on the Kindle unless it's free, because sometimes you'll find that the Kindle will offer the book free, and then I'll read it, and I can work from there.
It's tricky. It's tricky. We are going to wind up with one more question, and we'll probably wind up then because we want to be finished before 9. And this question is from Margaret Healy, and you can probably give many talks on this actually. So, hi Treasa, novel work. Do you use one novel in the class or different novels with groups? And do you start the novel work early in the first term? How do you do it?
So it's always meant to be one novel. The way it's meant to approach is every single child in your class is entitled to class level instruction. So even if you know that they're going to need support, even if they're years behind, they are entitled and they benefit from the same instruction as the rest of the class, which means we use one novel. Timothy Shanahan will always call it complex text. It should be higher than the reading ability of the class so that there is work to get to that. This is why my group work is important. This is why I have to have them set up, because then that group is going to work on different sections and different tasks. And it's going to need to be a supportive group. I'm going to give different scaffolds to different children in that group to try and support them to get to that level. And then I'm going to offer small group instruction as a secondary backup. So like if you think of it, in America, they call it tier 1, tier 2 instruction. Everybody gets the same tier 1 instruction. And in America, it's a legal right. You are entitled to your 5th grade instruction. But then if there are gaps, or if you need a greater challenge, if that instruction is not meeting your needs, then you get tier 2 instruction, or tier 3 then is individual instruction if tier 2 is still not meeting what you need. But it should be, and I know like there's flawed research. Timothy Shannon's really interesting. If you want to Google him on this, he goes right back, because in the beginning when I heard this, I was no, we like groups and every child reading at their level. And he went back and traced that research back, and that research doesn't actually exist, that we've all been doing this all along, believing it's the best way, whereas the research to back it doesn't exist, and there's research to contradict it. So it should be challenging text, that's the same for the whole class, but then supplementary small group instruction, which would be easier.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Thank you. And then we've had so many positive comments, Trasa, from Mrs. Little. Isn't that lovely? That's a lovely teacher name, Mrs. Little. Many thanks, Trasa. And I've learned so much from your content. Lots to consider for the new school year. Mila Weekers. I want to read out a few because we got so many. So let me see. I'm going to go right back to the beginning, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So Karchny Curon is right there at the beginning there, Simon. You have to go back, it was on Facebook. So she says, not a question. Thank you for sharing so many insights on Instagram. We're slowly building our school library with many of the recommendations coming from your list and shared content.
Well, that's lovely.
Rory O'Donnell, and this seems to be Lorraine O'Donnell's actually saying it through someone else's account. I think she broke into Rory O'Donnell's account. Very grateful for all that Treasa does, says and recommends. Amy Arnold, I love this dialogical classroom idea, really going to focus on developing it this year. Kate, at times we get bogged down in trying to do everything that we forget the simple things. Mm-hmm. That is true. Lots of people loving, I love that cube tower idea as well. I actually think though, if we were doing that cube tower thing, probably when I was in school and even now as a staff member, I think it would be all my color cubes a lot. So I need to get one of them myself.
that would track it for you though as well, because the child who does all the talking needs to know that as well, because that's their social skill developing, where they have to go, okay, it's a lot of red.
Yeah, it's a really good visual actually, isn't it, without actually saying it to them. People are wondering about the slides, the content. Now I know the video is going to be up, but I don't know, will you be putting your slides up, or do you do that, Treasa? Or
No, I can share the slides.
yeah. Thank you, thank you. And then Josephine Byrne, I love these ideas for monitoring participation in the group. Yeah, they're brilliant. And then Lorraine again, oh no, Rory McMahon. So Caroline McMahon is speaking through Rory's account. I would now consider keeping the group sustained for the year. So there you go. You convinced someone, Treasa, to build collaboration skills. I always change them, but it makes sense trying to change it as needed. I think so. Al Gouli NS, Catherine Clancy. Thank you, Catherine. She said, this is a great reminder to include everyone and not let a few dominate group conversations, those dominating people like Roz. But no, they can take over a lot. And then I think the introverted or the quieter children just end up becoming that role and becoming that sitting back and not saying anything, not speaking. Now we come to the bottom. I think we have one further comment, and we are going to leave it there, Simon. So no more putting questions up. Sinead Kirby, right at the bottom there, she wanted to know any general tips on promoting reading in the class when we have AR set up in the school?
Yeah, so I've made my feelings on AR very clear. I worked in the school where they had it for many years, and it had significant impacts, negative impacts, I would say, on the children. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that children have access to read any book they want, that it's reading for pleasure, that you're doing a lot of book talks, book promoting, matching children with books, and just sparking the joy of it. They can still do AR if the school wants them to do AR, but you need to make decisions about things like, are you going to level your library? I wouldn't we have to teach children how to choose the right book. That's a skill. When they go in to the library in town, when they go to a bookshop, they are not going to find their books leveled. Plus, we have a lot of children who don't like taking tests, who can quite happily flunk the test because it's 34 questions. They go boom, 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 boom. And then they're stuck reading books that are actually below their level. So you need, I would say, just bring the joy. Everything that I do is done to promote independent reading. First chapter Fridays. I said, we're going to have book tastings when we go back, just to make sure that you're actively working on independent reading, and then the AR is a secondary issue.
That's brilliant. I love that. First chapter Fridays and book tastings. Lovely. So lots of positive comments again. Then we're going to finish up now, definitely. So Mandy Minute. Hello, Mandy. How are you? Thank you. She said, amazing as always, Treasa. Margaret Healy, super information. Many thanks. Sinead again. So generous with your time and expertise. Much appreciated. Lucy McGann, so valuable at the beginning of the school year. Yes, actually, because it's a nice, simple reminder, and it doesn't feel stressful or pressurizing, Treasa. It kind of feels, yeah, I know this is right. It's right to do in the class. And then Sinead Kirby, thank you so much, Treasa. Amazing as always. So on that note, and we could go on all night, but it's got dark all of a sudden. Is it dark in Cork still?
It is. It's no longer doing these from LA and going, yeah, it's dark.
Treasa, listen, thank you so much. It was lovely to meet you. We were really excited, and we're really happy to have you here. To have you in Ireland, teaching in an Irish classroom, and your new school. Best of luck. You're going to love it, and they're very lucky to have you. And just wish you all the best for the year and the rest of your whatever happens for you next. And we'll be following you on between the covers of a good book.
Yes.
As usual, looking forward to that. And thank you to Simon there doing the tech in the background. Thank you to all of you guys who watched this and who tuned in. Thank you to all the teachers on Mash.ie, particularly at this time of year. We have loads of excellent teachers putting up loads of ideas and resources and posters and everything that they use in your class. And yeah, it's great to have this brilliant sharing community, and Treasa yourself as well for sharing all of that and all the time you put into your slides. Thank you. So listen, this is it. We're going to say goodbye. Do you have anything else to say, Treasa? Are you happy to go?
Thank you very much, and the very best of luck going back to school, especially for NQT starting. This is really exciting for you.
Yeah. No, it really is. It really is. Yeah. Best of luck to everyone, and lots of positive comments there. Again, your class is so lucky, Treasa. Can I join? Sarah Hannah Byrne said. Rory O'Donnell, Lorraine said, thank you so much, Lorraine. The best of luck for the year ahead. A random person, Aoife says, thanks a million, Treasa. Sarah Meady, thanks a million. And Ramshot, thank you so much, from Amanda Hawkins. So thank you so much. All right, guys, thank you everyone for listening, and go and enjoy the last few days or week or whatever you have left. And yeah, just enjoy it, and we'll see you all soon. Bye. See you.